Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I guess you are all fine and you are doing well. And you are also keeping to the rules concerning the COVID-19 and observing certain protocols that has been provided. All right. So keep safe and then stay blessed. Now, we want to continue with our last lecture. We were discussing the factors that influence the supply chain finance. And one of the key factors has been the global financial crisis. But let me recap what we did last week in a brief, and then we take it from there. Now, take note that supply chain finance is actually the intersection of the supply chain management field and the finance field. So here we try to borrow some of the models of the finance field into the supply chain management. So some models like amortization, sinking fund, annuity, and so on. We'll be looking at some of them. Okay, so the supply chain finance actually is an alternative and preferred finance solution. You see, that can benefit both suppliers and customers, in addition to the focal organization. So in actual fact, all the members that constitute the supply chain, they will benefit from supply chain finance concept. So that can benefit supply chain partners by solving financial pressures, you see, where, for example, a supplier is faced with raising the needed capital to run his business. Then he can be financed by a financial institution if the agreement is from the customer who has purchased the goods from the supplier, and then there is a trade arrangement between the three of them, the three partners. All right, so in actual fact, it also talks about obtaining a finance or getting a credit facility at much lower interest rates, right? And then it extends payment period. That is the payment terms. It also extends it. And then you can get more capital. You can raise more capital if you are implementing a supply chain finance policy. So in actual fact, it's all about optimizing financial flows along with the flow of goods and then information. You know that in the supply chain, we have flow of goods, right from the inbound logistics to the outbound logistics. And then information is also a key in the supply chain because every partner in the chain must be duly informed about how things are going on. Without information, then the operation of a supply chain will not be effective. All right, so goods and information flow, that has to be what? Optimized. So optimization means attaining the level that no other level can be compared. You see, so that is one of the basic or the key objective of supply chain finance. Okay, so like I've said, the supply chain finance is actually made up of the supply chain management field and then the finance field. So we have what we call the supply chain oriented field, which actually extends to include inventory finance. But when we talk about the finance oriented field, then that focuses on accounts receivable and accounts payable. So you can see that these are the two components of the financial statement that we'll be looking at in our subsequent lecture. Okay, so let's come back to our lecture today. And that is a continuation of last week's lecture. So we want to look at the factors that influence the development of supply chain finance. And one of the key factors is the global financial crisis. So we said that this crisis, we all know that it has its roots in the US subprime mortgage crisis, which originated in 2007. And then also, as a result, it puts most of the bargaining institutions, the power that they have into a disadvantage. You see, the bargaining institutions such as the banks and others, the power they have were put into a disadvantage. And the banks were, when they were trying to acquire funds, so they could not actually access for funds that they could use to run their business. So the global financial landscape actually changed, drastically, with the failure of several large financial institutions and then subsequent government intervention to prevent the imminent failure of the bank. Because in our environment here, we can witness banks that have collapsed in recent years. So in this case, governments intervene. I think you might have read about the global financial crisis and you know much about it. So in actual fact, there were lack of trust. And then uncertainty also led to disruption in the short-term funding. So the markets in the short-term funding do not have any trust that they could lend loans to customers. So that was one of the bases. All right. The other one has to do with inventory positions that has been maintained by businesses. So the changing level of inventory positions. Now we know that inventory constitutes significant portion of an organization's capital. So normally when you have acquired inventory, then your capital will be tied up in the inventory. And inventory can come in various forms. So inventory actually comprises, or it exists in all levels of the supply chain. For example, we have inventory of raw materials. We have inventory of semi-finished products. We have inventory of components. Some inventory are just components which are being held by the organization. And then we also have inventory of finished goods that are to be sent to the customer. And all these actually constitute significant capital that has been tied up in the inventory. So it came to a point that most organizations' inventory were, the capital that they were using in businesses were tied up in inventories of various forms. So since the inventories are normally a source of cost for the company, as they were tied up in substantial part of working capital. So it made it less responsive to the volatility of the market demand. So that was also another factor. Then when you come to globalization, there are several issues that characterize financial transactions on the global scale or in the global market. For example, we have exchange costs. We also have bureaucracy, which actually causes delay in the import and the export terrain. Then we also have tax-related issues. Then when you talk about rapid technological development, that actually also led to the development of supply chain finance, because it has a direct impact on consumer needs. What consumer wants were impacted by this technological development. And this is reflected in a shift in consumer preferences, right, toward more personalized products. So these days, consumers want something that has been customized to their needs, right? So we have rapid technological development. And then another issue is the regulatory changes, which actually went to the favor of this supply chain finance. So regulations such as the what we call Base 2 Capital Accord or Base 3, they all went to the favor of supply chain finance. And then finally, the relevant incentive programs. So some incentive programs were also, there were also factors that contributed. For example, there were programs that were issued by government authorities in favor of supply chain finance. Now, most notable of these programs in the US, for example, what we call the in the US, it was called the Pay Initiative, which was launched in 2014. And this was also followed by another one in the UK, corresponding supply chain finance initiative in the UK. Okay, so these were all factors that led to the development of supply chain finance. Okay, now let's look at the actors of supply chain finance. Basically, there are 4 actors. So actors actually refer to the parties involved in supply chain finance. So you have your supplier who supplies the goods. Then there should be a buyer or a customer for the goods who will need the goods. And then there should be you, the focal company. Okay, so normally we say there are 3 because when we take you, the focal company, as the buyer or the customer, then that will collapse the focal company and the buyers, right? But we have suppliers, we have buyers, and then we should have a financial service provider, such as what? Financial institution or banks. So there are 4 actors. But basically we can collapse them into 3 if we are taking you, the focal organization, as a buyer. So we normally have customers downstream, but you see, you, the focal organization, you have your suppliers and you have your customers. So in actual fact, we still have 4 actors. You have customers who patronize your goods, and then you have your suppliers who supply you your goods, and you, the focal organization. Okay, so, and then you have your financial providers as well. So there are 4 actors. So we can demonstrate these actors in this diagram, triangle. The financing institution is at the apex, the top, and then you have the buyer, you have the seller, and then you have the supply chain finance instruments, or what we call the models. We'll look at them very soon. So reverse factoring, we have dynamic factoring, we have trade credit, and so on. So that is in the middle, showing that all these 3 actors are actually linked by the supply chain finance. Okay, so when you look at the key, you see the key is financial flow, the green arrow. So this arrow is indicating that there is a financial flow of funds which is flowing from the financial institution to the buyer and the supplier. You see, then the blue line, which is actually on the supplier triangle, you see, indicates that there is what? Material flow. And the material actually flows from the supplier to the buyer. You see, but how would the supplier ship materials or ship goods to the buyer? Unless there is an information flow from the buyer that I need these materials. You see, so that is a red label, the red line indicating that there is a flow of information, but the information must even flow across the whole supply chain finance, right? So information must flow across the whole supply chain finance. All right. So that is the actors in the supply chain. Now let's look at the models this time. Let's look at the models. So the models, we can have about 6 of them that are currently in operation. Reverse factoring, and then we have trade credit, and then factoring, dynamic discounting, inventory financing, and then purchase order financing. Okay, but before we look at them, we can also have the supply chain finance like this. That is when you are talking about the models that we use in supply chain finance, we can group them like this. For example, this is the umbrella, supply chain finance, and the umbrella captures all these models. For example, we have accounts payable center, right? And then this accounts receivable center. You see, so in the accounts payable center, we have approved payable finance, and then also known as reverse factoring. So reverse factoring actually is something that is initiated from the supplier. You see, that is why we say it's reverse, because the risk that the supplier will bear initially is reverse from credit risk to default risk. You see, so that is why it is here. Then here we have receivables finance, receivable purchase, invoice discounting, factoring, and then for trading. You see, when we come to the other supply chain finance, these are others. Inventory finance, and this is actually the other component or subfield of supply chain finance. So this one we see it as what is captured under the supply chain management, right? And then we have related ones, that is documentary trade finance, bank payment, obligations, asset-based lending, and then payments and foreign exchange. Okay, sorry, some people are making calls and I have to disallow the call because I'm teaching. All right, so now this is also about a cycle. You see, the supply chain finance cycle, and the two main components, or there are three, sorry, the three main actors in the supply chain finance is the buyer, the supplier, and the financial institution who actually provide the finance to either the supplier, and especially that is the supplier, from the buyer who will make that arrangement with the financial institution. So here we see the buyer, and then we also have the supplier. So the buyer will give the supplier information. So we see information flowing from the buyer or the customer to the supplier. So information flow. And then we have products. You see, so the buyer needs some goods or products from the supplier. So the supplier also supply the products to the buyer, right? Now, in this one, we have what we call payable finance. You see, the buyer, that is why the accounts payable and the accounts receivable are the critical components that we'll look at in the financial statement. So payable finance and then receivable finance. Because this guy, the supplier, when he has sent the goods to the buyer, then he will create accounts receivable because it's on credit. So the buyer becomes, or the customer becomes, a debtor. Then you have also procured goods from the supplier. So you have created accounts payable. And you see, all these that we are discussing, they are based on trust. Because what actually makes business successful is about trust. But we don't have enough trust in our environment. Even to some extent, it's negative. You see, so here we normally refer to the buyer as what? High quality customer. When we say high quality customer, it's about a customer who can be trusted. You see, so some of these models, in fact, they might not be able to operate this model in a distrust environment. No, because if you don't keep to what you have said or what you have agreed on, then there will be a failure. You see, so we have what we call pay full invoice amount. You see, here the bank will initially pay the supplier. So we have pay discounted invoice amount. You see, the bank will discount the amount that the buyer is supposed to pay the supplier. And that arrangement is between the buyer and the bank. And then the buyer will then pay the bank at a later date, the date that is due for payment. That is why we have pay full invoice amount on due date. You see, on due date, or takes discount for early. You see, so if the bank wants the buyer to pay the money on time, then there will be discount on it, just as the bank also takes a discount and pay the supplier on time. You see? Okay, so we have the supply chain finance platform. Okay, so what is here? So this one is route is very small. I can't see it. It sends what? Assignment. Okay. Well, let me enlarge it. No, here I can also not enlarge. Or I can enlarge. Okay, I can. So, but it's still not clear. I think it's about sense adjustment something, and sense what we. Okay, I can. So okay, so this arrow is indicating this information. What is being sent to the supply chain finance? This is also sending information to the supply chain finance, and then the bank will accept requests for early payment. Good. You see, so the buyer will make requests to the bank to pay the supplier early. You see, so this is a bank, and then this is a loaded bank. Okay. You see, so this is actually the arrangement. So the models that we have mentioned, reverse factoring, dynamic discounting, inventory financing, and so on, trade credit, and so on, they are all using these three approaches. Okay. So let's look at the reverse factoring. And in actual fact, it's an alternative factoring mechanism for downstream customers who cooperate with banks to offer loans to upstream suppliers. So you see, you are the focal organization. So if you are taken as a customer, you have procured goods from your supplier, but the terms of the trade, you see, it will take a long time for you to pay. But your supplier also needs funds to enable him transact business. Otherwise, the business might not be progressing, and then that will also affect the supply chain in general. If you want goods, you might not be able to get. So you arrange with your bank to pay your suppliers, whilst you make arrangement to pay your bankers the full amount at the due date. You see, so factoring mechanism for downstream. So you are at the downstream, and your supplier is what? Upstream. So you pay your suppliers upstream. So the bank will offer you the loan that you need to pay. So in this case, the bank will just pay your suppliers, right? And then you will pay your bankers at the due date. Now, the higher the production cost, the higher the significance of reverse factoring that influences supply chain sustainability. You see, when the production cost is high, then actually you, the buyer, you also have to purchase or get your procurement at a high rate. So then that case, that is where you even need the supply chain finance. The bank will come in and then will pay your suppliers. And that will actually sustain the supply chain, you see. Because when production cost is high, as we have it on the environment here, goods that we produce locally actually attract high costs compared to what we have actually imported. What are these? Because there is too much taxes. You have electricity bill, utility bills that are very high, and so on and so forth. So at the end of the day, what will happen? We'll get the goods at a high cost. And I don't think supply chain finance is being working in this country. You see, this has been originated in large or developed countries. But let's see, probably it's working here. So what are some of the key issues? Here, credit risk becomes what? Default risk. You see, because in actual fact, originally, the relationship between the supplier and the customer is that there has been creation of credit risk because the supplier has offered the goods to the customer on credit basis. So whether the customer is going to pay or not is a risk that the supplier has taken. Meanwhile, the supplier also incur money and has committed funds into the goods, right? The goods that is supplying to the customer. See, so that is a credit risk. But once supply chain finance comes in, then this risk has now been what? Reversed to what we call default risk, because in this case, it's the customer who is going to pay the bank, the financial institution. So if the customer defaults, so that will be a risk to the financial institution. You see, so that's why we say that in most cases, it is the financial institution that bears all the risk. You see, so it ends at bringing efficiency. Then also there is what we call low risk financing. Yes, so if you have converted your credit risk to default risk, then that is actually reducing the risk in terms of what finance, because you, the supplier, you can then get funds at lower interest rates compared to if you don't have this arrangement in place. So this can better promote supply chain sustainability and efficiency, as I've already indicated. You see, so it makes the supply chain more efficient, and it sustains it to its foreseeable future. Now, firms' payment terms extension cost decreases with lower demand uncertainty, the higher net profit margin, and operating leverage. So your payment terms extension cost also decrease with lower demand uncertainty. You see, okay. So we are still on the reverse factoring. We'll look at what actually constitutes the reverse factoring in this diagram. Okay, so here we can see the three actors. We have the customer, who is actually the buyer. So here is buyer's accounts payable. Because if you're a buyer, then you have created accounts payable in your books. You have procured the goods on credit, so you have accounts payable. Then you, the supplier, you see, so this is the supplier's accounts what receivable. So you have supplied the goods. And then here, what happens? Buyer requests for buyer issues purchases request. Buyer issues purchases order. Good. Buyer issues purchases order. So you are the customer. You want to buy or procure goods from the supplier. So you have issued the purchasing order. So that's number one. You can see that this is number two. So supplier then delivers the goods. So when the goods has been shipped to the supplier, then you issue an invoice. So supplier issues and what? Supplier invoices buyer. Okay, so that's the third position. Now take note that some people think that invoice will precede the goods. For example, in some organizations, they want you to pay, and that's what actually happens in the environment here. You must pay before the goods will be shipped to you, or so on and so on and so forth. But you see, sometimes in order to make everything intact in terms of carriage costs, in terms of other charges that might come outside the product itself. That is why invoice must be given after the goods have been shipped, because even the goods are shipped, there could be the possibility that some of them could damage. We could have some of them to be ineffective, destructive and so on. So to avoid all these problems, we normally invoice after we have shipped the goods. Okay, so now the customer, who's the buyer, would then, that's number four, buyer approves invoice. You see, so the invoice that the supplier has shipped to the buyer, it should be approved and validated. So approves invoice for payment and then sends confirmation to bank. You see, take note that all these processes are enabled by information technology. So it has been sent to bank. Then buyer makes payment on original due date. Okay, so that's number 8. This is the last one, actually. But when the request has been sent to the bank for payment, number 5, that's number 4. So when you come to number 5, supplier offered early payment discount, you see. So the bank will pay the supplier earlier. For example, maybe it's a 6-month duration, but you want it to be within 30 days. So you work out the discount rate, right? What the bank will take, and then they will pay the supplier the amount. And then these lines, right? this will be an information from the bank to the supplier. So 6, supplier accepts early payment. So that is the arrow flowing downwards, you see. Then 7, bank funds early payment to supplier. So that's the arrow pointing upwards, you see. So, and then now the debt is between the bank and the buyer. You see, so the buyer will now pay final amount, that the full original amount on the due date. Or if the bank also wants the money to be paid early, then it will also pay on discounts. So that's the financing source. So when you look at the key here, so this line is for supply chain process, opportunity identify, supplier payments, and then so on. So that is actually what happens in the reverse factoring. Okay, then let's go to some of the advantages of reverse factoring. Here, the main advantage is that the reverse factoring can actually facilitate credit risk, which of the supplier, and this is equal to default risk. You see, so this one we have already mentioned that we are saying that your credit risk reverses to be your default risk. You see, so the main advantage of reverse factoring is that the credit risk of the supplier is equal to the default risk of the high quality customer. In fact, the customer must be what? A high quality one. So a customer that you default in payment, then you are not, you cannot have this title. So this is actually based on trust. And then the usage of reverse factoring allows high risk suppliers to mitigate their credit risk level, you see, with that of their high quality buyers. And again, this also focuses on a customer that is described as what? High quality. And thus allowing them to reduce their cost of debt while increasing their level of access to liquidity. And then finally, it provides benefits to both banking institutions and buyers. You see, because the banking institution also gets some revenue in terms of the discounting factor. When you have discounted something, they also take that money. You see, so it creates an opportunity for the bank to also make revenue. So as in many countries, reverse factoring is offered by banks, yes. Such a case enables lenders to develop strong relationships with small and medium-sized firms, you see. So the bank actually also gets some revenue from this kind of arrangement. So it benefits all the partners. So you can see that the supplier also benefits, the buyer benefits by not paying early, and then the banks also get some revenue. All right, the second one is trade credit. Now, trade credit is actually classified into what? Accounts receivables and accounts payable, because that one is actually between the buyer and the supplier. And this can be applied to increase the revenue of upstream or downstream partners and affect the whole chain. Because the whole chain actually involves the upstream suppliers and then downstream partners who are actually customers. You see, so the trade credit can be applied in this term, and when it applies in this manner, it will affect the whole chain. Now, focal firm. So you are the focal firm. You have your customers downstream, and then you have your suppliers upstream. So focal firm, they can accelerate cash flows and also decrease operational costs by increasing the payment delay to upstream partner, you see, or tightening credit period offered to downstream customer. For example, customers on credit, they have a period that they must pay. So if you tighten it, and tightening means that you are not actually expanding the duration or the period for which they must pay. You are rather bringing it, reducing it, right? So when you do that, then you are improving your cash flow. And then you are also trying not to pay your partners in the upstream, that is your suppliers, on time. You see, so in that case, you, the focal company, your cash flows will improve when you are able to maintain that strategy. Then offering trade credit can increase the profitability of the overall firm, of course. You see, because you don't pay your suppliers on time, and also you allow your credit and your customers to pay on time. See, so that will actually improve your cash flows, and then your profitability will also increase, right? So he said that offering trade credit can increase the profitability of the overall chain and each member, but only when the interest charge of suppliers is smaller than that of the retailers in a certain threshold. Okay, let's move on to we are still on the trade credit. Now, trade credit offered or received by a firm, you see, we can have, a firm can receive trade credit, and a firm can also offer a trade credit. So if you are the customer, right, or the buyer, then you are offering trade credit. If you are the supplier, then you are receiving trade credit. So receive or offered by a firm, that is accounts receivable and accounts payable, you see. So these are the two accounts that operate in terms of buyer and supplier relationship. So it's positively related to firm's profitability level, of course. So as we indicated previously, the supply chain actually will be making profit in terms of trade credit. Now, smaller suppliers with longer production lead time and quality evaluation time rely more on extended trade credit. Yes, if your lead time is longer, your production lead time is long, then of course trade credit will be an advantage to you. And then you also make sure that your products are of high quality. So you evaluate quality from time to time, you see. Then two positive effects of trade credit is that it mitigates information asymmetries and then reduces tax burden. Okay, so information flow between partners is not in asymmetric form. All right. Okay, so factoring. Let's then move on to factoring. Factoring enables a firm to sell its accounts receivable to a third party to receive immediate cash. Then the customer becomes the debtor and the need to pay the third party directly. So here, you are the supplier, right? And you have sold goods to a customer. Then you have created accounts receivable, right? Because you now have a debtor. But you can sell the accounts receivable to another person, a third person. This normally is a financial institution to pay you. And in this case, the financial institution is also going to make some deductions. So you're going to be paid at a discount. You see, for example, if, for example, let's say we have what we call, I've forgotten this, what we call annualized reverse rate. Let's say a buyer has given a supplier the annualized reverse rate as 18%. So that is the interest rate that is actually existing between the two, 18%. But then the supplier have accepted early payment from the bank. Are you okay? Let's say that this annualized is made up of the whole year. So that is the 12 months. So let's take it as 360 days, 360 days before the customer will pay the supplier. So the supplier has agreed that the bank should pay it at earlier dates. Probably you want it in 30 days. So out of the 12 months, the supplier wants the money in just what, 1 month. See, so how will you calculate the discount? In this case, we have to divide the 18 by the 360. So when you divide the 18 by 360, you're going to get, is it 0.5%? You get 18 divided by 360. This will give us, yes, 0.05, you see. Then we multiply this 0.05 by the 30 days that the supplier wants. So that will give us 1.5%, you see. So in this case, the bank is going to take 1.5%. So if, for example, you have 200,000 cedis, you see, that is the value of the goods that has been delivered to the buyer or the customer, and you want early payment, then multiply by 0.1015, yeah, 0.15. This is so here, yes. So the bank will take 3,000 out of the 200,000, you see, and pay you early. So that is actually what happens in this arrangement. So here, factoring enables a firm to sell its accounts receivable. So the firm who is the supplier has sold its accounts receivable to a third party, which is actually a financial institution, for immediate cash. Then the customer becomes the debtor and the need to pay the third party directly. You see, so it's just like the reverse factoring. That's why this is also factoring. You see, so here, initially the agreement or the contract is between the supplier and the customer, but a third party has come in to relieve them of the financial burden. So now the agreement is now between the customer and the third party. That's simply what it means by factoring. So it is a risk transferring channel. Of course, it's a risk because you are transferring the risk that is associated to another party, which allows suppliers high credit risk transfers to high quality customers. And again, you see that when we are mentioning customers, we don't say just customers, we say high quality customers. So a customer that you can be what? Trusted. A customer that you are trustworthy, especially in weak credit availability and inefficient bankruptcy enforcement environment. Okay. Then cash-strapped firms is if you don't have collateral such as fixed assets. You see, you cannot go in for this approach. So cash-strapped firms in a lack of fixed assets as collateral cannot always get support from conservative financial institutions and banks. See, so you need to get collateral in a form of non-current assets. Now, with such constraints, factoring is a better and easier access type. Of course, some of the models, you need to get a collateral. So you can rather use factoring, you see, access type of debtor finance to improve the working capital and cash flow positions compared to payment delay strategy. Okay, so the main users of factoring are smaller, younger, and limited companies that may experience financial difficulties with high value of collateral and loan. You see, so you can see that this approach is actually suitable for our environment here, factoring, because most of our firms are smaller businesses, micro units. You see, okay. Now let's go on to dynamic discounting. So dynamic discounting is actually a technology-enabled solution for companies to capture and then automate discounts to their entire supply chain. So here, the discounts must be captured and then automated to the entire supply chain. For example, it gives buyers more flexibility in order to select how and when to pay their suppliers in exchange for a lower price or discount for the goods and services purchased. So that is the meaning of the dynamic. The dynamic simply means that you can make a choice, you see. So the dynamic component refers to the choice to provide discounts based on the date of payment to suppliers. So it is not something that is static. So you can actually assess the various financing options, and then you make a choice. So it's usually the earlier the payment is made, the greater the discount. Of course, if you are making some payment, of course, if you are, let's say you are paying something cash, you are paying cash for a good, then that one it does not attract any interest. That would be zero. But the longer time it takes to pay, then you pay higher interest. On high purchase, for example, if you are paying for a product, or you have taken the good, but then you be making payment in a year's time, then that will attract more interest than when you are making payment in, let's say, 3 months time. So that is what happens here. And then dynamic discounting, finally, the main benefit of dynamic discounting is the fact that the buyers can use their own balance sheet or excess cash to generate additional purchasing discount. And this is the reason why we have to do what we call cash flow statement. So cash flow statement is all about the flow of cash, the inflows and the outflow of cash. So at the end of the day, you know whether you have excess cash available or you have limited cash. So if you have excess cash and the cash is just available, it is not being invested in anything, then you are not a good finance manager. You see, financial management, it means that you manage your inflow and the outflow of cash. You should make sure that cash is available for daily transactions. And at the same time, you don't run out of cash. See, so here, dynamic discounting simply has this advantage that you can identify cash that is available on your balance sheet or excess cash to generate additional purchasing or discount, while the sellers benefit by both reducing working capital and then being able to get paid earlier. All right. Then let's look at the last one, the inventory finance. Okay, last but one. Now, in this inventory financing is a line of credit or what we call a short-term loan made to a company so it can purchase products for sale. A short-term loan that has been made to a company so that that company can purchase products and sell. But the products that has been purchased, or what we call the inventory, will serve as collateral for the loan if the business does not sell its products and cannot repay the loan. You see, so you have taken the goods, you have to sell those goods and then pay the money. If you are not able to sell the goods, then the goods will be taken because it is serving as a collateral. So inventory financing is especially useful for businesses that must pay their suppliers in a shorter period of time, than it takes them to sell their inventory to customers. So I think we can liken this to some of these supermarkets where goods will be brought to them. Let's say Unilever will bring some goods, you must sell, and then you pay, and so on. So that is about inventory. Then finally, we have purchase order financing. So this one also refers to the short-term commercial finance option. It's also about short-term, right? That provides capital to pay suppliers upfront for verified purchase orders. So you get to acquisition of a capital that will enable you to pay your suppliers upfront. That is if you are ordering for some goods. And businesses avoid depending or depleting cash reserves or declining an order because of cash flow challenges. Okay. So, okay, we will have some calculations on all things that we are talking about, especially sinking fund and then amortization. Because you say that the foregoing suggests that now, if you see you, the customer, you have arranged with your bank to pay the supplier, for where you, the customer, will pay your bank at a later date or at the due date. Then you can also decide to set some monies aside and invest in a fund, purposely for paying that debt on the due date. You see, because this is made up of just a single lump sum of payment that you'll be making on that date. See, so in that case, if you are setting monies aside, then that becomes a sinking fund. All right. I think it's raining, so it will disturb the program. So we'll look at the calculation aspect in our next lecture. All right. So have a nice